Oh. Okay, so this week we begin with Vayikra, which is also known as Leviticus. Chapter 5, verse 10. And I think you're going to like it. Literally in English it says, and the second he does, burn as judgment, and cover upon him the Cohen from sin he that sinned, and will be forgiven to he. I love this very literal translation like this. It tickles me sometimes because it sounds so ridiculous, and what's so weird is after a while it starts to make sense. Anyway, it starts with ve'et, which that's the word and. The v sound is how you say and in Hebrew. And the et has no meaning. It's just an arrow that points at something. And I literally, when I translate, I draw an arrow because that's all it is. It's just look over there. So it's and hasheni. Hasheni. You guys should know that. Sheni, it's the second. It's number 2. So and the second, ya'aseh, which literally would be he does, or he make, or he labor, or he work. It's the masculine, which is why the yod is put in front of it. But it's the word asa, properly, to labor, to work about, anything, to make, to produce by labor, to manufacture, to fabricate. So it's you doing something, right? Olah. Now we know what it is. It's the burnt offering. So when the Hispanics walk around and say, hola, that means it's time to eat. The offering is ready. Hola. I'm just kidding. It's what is laid on the altar. That's the barbecue pit. What is offered on the altar, the barbecue pit, especially a burnt offering, a sacrifice of which the whole was burned, ascent steps. Not really. That's not really a meaning. That's a usage, because you had the ascent upward, not by steps. I don't know why it says steps, but not by steps. You ascended up to the altar. You had to, because this was a gigantic barbecue pit. Literally. I mean, it was humongous. And you were cooking entire, cows. I mean, after they were butchered and stuff, you had, I don't know, 60 or 70. I have no idea. It could have been 2. I don't know. But even if it were 2, think of how big your barbecue pit would have to be. So this is huge. And so you had to go upward. Why? Well, because the more you're cooking, the more firewood has to be there. And the more firewood has to be there, the more air has to go up under it. And yeah, anyway, this thing was huge. So that's the ascending part. Not really a meaning, but a usage. So we're talking about this barbecue pit, this thing that's going on here. And this is kamishpat. That's as judgments, or the word like, L-I-K-E, it's like judgment, or it's according to judgment. You could say it that way, but judgment according to the Torah. Everything, you can never forget this about the Bible. Everything, when it talks about judgment, when it talks about what's right as opposed to what's wrong, it's all based on the Torah. That's the, what's the word I'm looking for? That's the measure by which everything is measured. There's, you hear the Christians talk about everyone's going to stand before God one day and give an account. And there's a reason why they say that. It's in the New Testament, right? Maybe it's in what they call the Old. Who knows? Could happen, right? But anyway, they think that they're going to give an account for everything, and they would be right to think that. And so you're going to give this account. Now, whether that looks like, God standing there playing a video of your whole life and, tapping his foot on the ground saying, now, what do you have to say about that, mister? I don't think that's exactly what's going to happen. Plus, I actually don't think it's going to go down that way. I think that when we mess up, we're punished. Pretty much right here and now. And you better hope it's right here and now, because you sure don't want the other way of going around. I don't want him showing video from my life. I don't want a big audience. Everybody's sitting there eating popcorn. Boo! Could you imagine? I'm just throwing that out there, right? You don't want it to be that way. But it's all based on the Torah. Even the Christians, you better get this through your mind. It's what you're being judged on. There's got to be a law, right? There's got to be something that it's judged on. Oh, it's just what's in God's mind. Well, God gave us what's in his mind. We wrote it. Moses wrote it down. So it's the measure by which everything is measured. Everything is judged. You cannot ever forget that. So it's according to the Torah. It's used of the act of judging, of a place of judgment, in a forensic cause, to plead anyone's cause, to be his patron in a Jewish court and before the face of God, which is what we just encountered just a few minutes ago, praying over this country because it's in a mess right now, right? It happens, and it'll happen again. This won't be the last time. Anyway, so it's all about the judgment, and you've got to know that the judgment is based on the Torah. If it's said to do it and you don't, you're living in sin. If it says not to do it and you do it, you're living in sin. And so you're judged against it. What are you in trouble for? Well, I didn't wear my tzitzit. That's a real thing because you were commanded to wear tzitzit in plural. You were commanded by God to do that. If you're calling yourself a child of God, you better well do it, because if you don't, you're going to get in trouble for it. Now, what that trouble is, I don't know. It's not eternal Christian hell, I can tell you that. But there's got to be some kind of punishment. Maybe you don't get that promotion. Maybe, I don't know. I have no idea. It doesn't say. God is a righteous judge. You'll pay for that sin in one way or the other. I don't know what that is. But I know it's not dramatic, because it's not a big thing. But, I mean, I say that in comparison to murder or something like that. It's not a big thing. But how big is it to tell God, I'm not going to do what you told me to do? I mean, it's all a perspective, right? So our next word is vechiper. It's a covering, to cover over, to overspread with anything, as with pitch. Think about that. That's a pretty dark covering. That is blocking out the light of the sun, right? No rain going to get in this place. By the way, biblical pitch is not what you think. We think of tar generally nowadays. We think of pitch as tar, but 3,500 years ago, pitch was resin, often mixed with tar, but the pitch was actually resin. Think of that. That's some pretty stuff. That's you know what they use resin for? Was it that plastic type stuff that they make cars out of?
Well, if Dad asked me, I could have told you.
It's what Corvettes are made out of.
Yeah.
You have fiberglass.
Fiberglass, yeah.
Resin's like fiberglass. So that you know what biblical resin is. Anyway, or pitch rather. So this is a serious covering. Of course, we're talking about this is the word keeper. You hear it? This is where we get the word kippah, which is a noun. Why it sounds different, but something you put on your head. A kippah can literally, kapar is the root word here. This is a covering right here. It's covered me over, right? And a blanket is a covering. A shirt is a covering because it's covering over my shoulders and my chest, and my pants are a covering. My socks are a covering. We're talking about something that literally covers, right? So I hope you're following that. So this thing that was done, is for a covering. And this is alav, which is literally upon him or upon it. Can be either way. Because remember, when you say the word it, if you will, in Hebrew, you say he if it's masculine and heave if it's feminine, right? You always got to keep that in mind. So then we have ha-Kohen. So you're either covering the Cohen or the Cohen is the covering. Does it sound familiar? Because we've learned that already. The Cohen is the covering. Then it says, mechatato, from sin he, right? And what is sin? To sin, which is to wander from or stumble in the way. Well, what's the way? The Torah. How quickly my children have turned from the way. Remember when Moshe went up the mountain and God was writing out the commandments on, by the way, and I'm sure I've said this before, but God did not write just the 10 commandments on two big, stones that look like, what do you call those in graves? Headstones for a graveyard. It wasn't like that. The stuff that they did legal papers on, if you will, back 3,500 years ago was a small tablet about this big. Can you tell what you're... They were small. And the writing was unbelievably small. How they could chisel like that was just beyond me. And maybe it was that way because it was easier to chisel that way. I don't know. I've never tried to chisel a stone, so I have no idea how they did that. But these things were very, very small. And so they were written front and back. Well, the 10 commandments as we know them wouldn't have covered the whole front of one, let alone need for two to cover it, right? So the law was written on this. And it was written, it says, by the finger of God. That means in God's handwriting. Doesn't mean that God ever actually touched it, but it does mean it was in his handwriting. God did this, not somebody else. And so he's up there getting all of this stuff, and these people are down there breaking God's law. Just 40 days after they swore to God that they would live according to that law, it was laid out to them. They were told what the law would be. They thought it over, they talked it over, and then they said, everything that he said we'll do. Moshe leaves, he's gone for almost 40 days, and everybody's like, we don't know where he is, with the man, Moshe the man, the human being, we don't know where he's gone or what's happened to him. So let's make our own God, let's break the law that we just promised God we would never break, And so God says how quickly they have turned from the way. The way is the law of God, the Torah. And what is sin? No, it's a misstep. It's to miss the mark like an archer. Oh, good Lord Almighty. The easiest way to understand what sin is and what sin is not, it's put very succinctly in a single sentence. And it was written by Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Every Jew knows that name. You ought to know that name. But Christians know that name as John, just simply as some guy named John, son of Zebedee, I think, is what they call Zakkai for some reason. I have no idea why he was called Zebedee. Well, whatever. I think that's the right English word, I think. But if I'm not, please don't send me, nasty grams. Most of you young people don't even know what a nastygram is. But anyway, he said that everyone who commits sin is in rebellion of the Torah, comma. That was only half of it. The rest of it was because sin is Torah rebellion. Sin is Torah rebellion. Every Jew on this planet needs to learn the words of 1 John chapter 3, verse 4. When a Christian starts telling you that he's not under the law, you need to say to him, but your book says everyone who commits sin is also in rebellion of the Torah because sin is Torah rebellion. So then it says asher, that's the word that, T-H-A-T, or maybe we can switch that out with W-H-I-C-H, that or which. Then it says chata. So now we're saying the word for sin again. This is the, everyone who commits sin is also in rebellion of the Torah, because sin is Torah, rebellion, same word. Then, so saying that there's sin is, the rabbi, the Kohen, which means priest, is going to be the covering for that sin. Then it says ve nislach. This should be your favorite Hebrew word. Of course, in my world, whatever Hebrew word I happen to be talking about, in that moment, that's my favorite Hebrew word. But this should be everybody's favorite Hebrew word. Ve nislach. And he will be forgiven. He will be forgiven. You'll be forgiven. It'll be like, as far as the east is from the west is. It'll be like it never happened. It'll be like Moses never murdered anybody. It'll be like David didn't get a guy's wife pregnant and then try to kill, or actually kill the guy to cover it up. It'll be like, no, it won't be like that. Well, anyway, forgiveness. Let's talk about what is forgiveness. It's to pardon, to forgive. That's what they say. No. This is a Hebrew word. So we need to find out, what does the Hebrew word mean? To be merciful. The primary idea seems to be that of lightness, of lifting up. It's from the root word salah, to suspend a balance, to weigh. You have been measured, you have been weighed, you have been measured, and have been found level. Everything's okay. Here's all your sins sitting right here. And here's the sacrifice made by your Kohen over here. And the thing is perfectly level. Does that mean that because it's been thrown as far as the east is from the west? Because, does that mean that it is as if you never did it? No. That means God is merciful. He is merciful. That means that instead of getting the absolute maximum punishment, you get the minimum. Because yes, you will be punished. How do I know? Make no mistake about it, God is not mocked. You will reap from that which you have sown. We can't do the one without the other. But we receive mercy. Mercy from God Almighty. And when you've received mercy from God, you have received mercy. So our translation is, and the second, speaking of the dove, because remember we got to tie it to the previous verses, and the second dove, he makes a burnt offering according to the ordinances, and the Kohen will be a covering over him for the sin that he sinned, and he will be shown mercy. Mercy. You don't get out of it. You don't get to go murder somebody and then think that you don't have to go to jail. Oh no, Jesus has forgiven me. No, it's not like that. But you receive mercy. Does that mean that you don't have to have the death sentence? No. God says if you commit murder, you get the death sentence. But you receive mercy. Well, how's that merciful, Rob? Well, maybe you don't die in the next life. That's some serious mercy. Maybe it doesn't last for all eternity. That's some serious mercy. It's why we call it forgiveness. But I think we've forgotten what forgiveness is. It's mercy. Let's move on to verse 11. Yeah, we got plenty of time. In English, this one's kind of weird. And if not, attain hand he to two turtle doves, or two, it's T-O 2, the number 2. 2 turtle doves, 2 children of the dove, and bring offering he that sin tenth the fine flour to sin offering, not he put upon her oil, and not he give her upon her frankincense for sin she. I would think about this. Let's say that you committed murder. God's saying that he's still going to let you bring an offering. He's still going to let you bring an offering for your sin. He doesn't just turn his back on you and say you have no hope. See, that's what mercy's all about here. Is if you do what God says, even when you've done the thing that you could ever think of doing, God still left the law such that you can bring an offering. And when you bring that offering, that Cohen covers you, just like he covers the guy who never did anything wrong in his life. That's mercy. Because you sure don't deserve it when you're still lost in your sin, do you? It's why when Shaul said that the sacrifice of the Messiah is, to put it in English terms, the sacrifice of Messiah, for those of you who don't know what that means to a Jew, the sacrifice of Messiah is the animal. When God entered into his covenant with Abraham, that's when it all began. There was a sacrifice. The animals were killed, they were barbecued, if you will, and the blood was spilled. And then when he entered fully into covenant with his people, that happened at Sinai with Moshe. Animals were killed, the barbecue, food was barbecued. People ate of that sacrifice. They had ribs and whatnot. Not pig ribs, by the way, but cow ribs. And that sacrifice put them in covenant. And so the sacrifice of Mashiach was after that covenant was broken and God gave Israel her bill of divorce in Hosea chapter 2, if you don't know where that happened. He also made the promise that he would make a new sacrifice that would restore the covenant. It wasn't going to start something new. It was going to be restoration, because the word for new and restoration is the same word. Hadashah, it's the same word. So, the sacrifice of Mashiach is the re-entering of the covenant with God, the ability to have forgiveness for sin. That's what it is. And Shaul wrote that while we were still in our sin, while we were still in the filth and the dark of our sin, God made that sacrifice. So if we realign ourselves with that covenant, then that Cohen who made that sacrifice covers over us. That's mercy. Mercy. So it starts off with Im, and remember, vet is the word and in Hebrew. Im is if. It's used in a lot of different ways. Remember, in Hebrew, one word is used a bazillion different ways, right? So it can be if, it can be and if, which normally it is. Sometimes it's for the word behold or truly or certainly. It's used that way. Not often, but it is used that way. But generally, it's an interrogatory. It's a question. So, and if, lo, if not, tasig, attain. Oh, kind of a weird word to use, but what this is attain to. If you cannot, like if I'm going to reach out to shake your hand and you're too far away, I cannot attain to that handshaking, right? If the cup is up on the top shelf and I'm too short to reach it, I cannot attain to that. And so if you cannot attain to what? If your hand cannot attain, if you cannot get it in your hand, li shite, that's for two, rowing, Urim. I knew I was going to say that wrong. Turtle doves. If your hand cannot attain to turtle doves, what he's saying, if you can't afford it, if that's beyond your ability to afford those 2 turtle doves, that's what he's saying. Or, because the next word is lishne, 2, and then the word is b'nai, so it's 2 children. Yonah, 2 children of the dove. So it's 2 young ones. If it can't attain, what was the first word? Turtle doves. If you cannot afford a turtle dove, or you cannot afford 2 young doves, if that's beyond your ability to be able to, because you're flat broke, you don't have any money. When they shut down the country, you didn't get your paycheck from the government, and you lost your job because they couldn't reopen, whatever. You found yourself in this position where you cannot afford it. God says, too bad. No, because God gives mercy. The heavy. You still got to bring something, right? You still got to make it come. So you got to bring it. It's pointing to something. Carbano. That's carbon. Carbon. How do they say that in the New Testament? I guess it's carbon. Yeah. Carbano. It's an offering. Asher chata. That's the word for sin. The not doing what God said, or doing what He said not to. You've done this. So it's a sin offering. Asirit. That's the word for 10 or 10th in this case. Ha'ephah. That's a measure of grain. They think that's a word of Egyptian origin. So the truth is, nobody knows exactly how much that is. But you can't afford 2 turtle doves. You're flat broke. What do? You go back into your cabinet, into your cupboard, and you open up that little lid, that little Tupperware lid. You reach down in there and you get you 10 ephah solet of that fine flour. So trust me, if you can't afford a turtle dove, 10 ephah of fine flour is not very much flour. It's very little, by the way. Very little. Lechatat. So now you bring in the flour for what? The sin offering. That's going to be your sin offering. The flour. Could you imagine this? How merciful is God? He could have just said, no, you better just learn to save your money. You just better learn to keep your job. No. God knows that we're all going to be in this situation 1 or 2 or 3 times, or maybe our whole life. You never know. Because it is what it is. And the poor will always be among us. And so whether it's momentary or you've been this way your whole life, God is showing mercy to you. And it's so that everybody can bring an offering. And it says lo, which is the negative article. So not yasim. You're not going to put it. You're not going to set it. You're not going to place it. Aleha, upon it. That's upon her literally, but it's on it. Shemen. So you're not going to place oil on it. Think about it. You're going to bring this offering. You got to bring this 10 parts of the ephah, which is, I don't know, let's say it's 3 cups. I have no idea. It's not. But you're going to bring this, but you don't have to bring the oil. In fact, you're not allowed to bring the oil. You're just bringing the flour. You're not going to put this oil on it. And the word literally means fat. But shemen is it's oil. So the oil can come from an olive, because if you squeeze one, oil will come out. Or it can come from the fat on a cow. There's lots of oil there. I mean, oil can come from a lot of different places, and this is not specific. This is velo and not yitin. So you're not going to give. You're not going to place in the hands of that Cohen. alehaz upon it, levona. You're not going to put the frankincense on it. And frankincense is called frankincense because of its white color. Because the more pure frankincense is, the more white it is. The only time I've ever seen frankincense, Donna bought some one time just because we wanted to know what it was and what it looked like and felt like and all that. And ours was yellow, so we didn't even get the good stuff, man. So you don't even have to bring the frankincense. You don't have to bring the oil. All he's asking you to do is bring a little bit of flour. Because the next word is key. Chatat, or for, I guess it's not because, it's for. Because in English you don't understand it if I say because. But if I say for chatat, then you know it's for the sin offering. And then it ends with he, which literally is she, and that means it. Our translation of verse 11, and if he cannot afford 2 turtle doves or 2 young doves, he will bring an offering for his sin, 1/10 ephah of fine flour for a sin offering. He will not put oil on it, nor frankincense for sin. And I've added this note. Many have speculated as to why this verse states that no oil or frankincense was to be used. Most agree that it is because the oil and frankincense is used with the praise offering, and this is for sin. Thus, I don't know, there's some kind of difference. To tell you the truth, nobody knows why. That could, maybe that is the reason. But God never said. He just said, that's all you have to bring. It's just the flour. That's mercy. Even though you're poor and you've done this horrible, horrible thing, you still only have to bring the flour and not much of it. And again, you could just bring, say, 2 widow's mites, because I'm sure that's enough to buy the flour you need. It doesn't literally have to be flour. Because, I mean, if you can bring the mite to the temple, I promise you there was flour there that they would give you to give to the Kohen. You just had to make the exchange. You were not making a purchase. You were making an exchange. Because you weren't taking it home for yourself, right? You were just exchanging the one for the other, because you couldn't just walk up there and hand him 2 widow's mites. You actually had to hand him the flour. And in our religion, we make sure you have what you need. And if you couldn't afford that, I guarantee you they would have given it to you. Because the point wasn't that that's what God wanted. The point was it had to be something. That was the point. All right. So we've got time. Verse 12, and make come her, so make and bring it to the Kohen, a handful, the Kohen from her, full handful, he or it in this case, memorial, and make smoke and make burn you upon fire, Yahweh, sin, she. So it starts off the Hevia, to bring it. It's from the word bow. Remember, in Hebrew, to come is also to go, because you can't go somewhere and not come somewhere. And you can't come somewhere without going somewhere. You follow what I'm saying? That's the way it works in Hebrew. That's the way it even works that way in modern day languages, particularly in Africa. It's very common. They still use those words in that same way. In America, we have a different word for everything. We have a word for come and we have a word for go. But in Hebrew, it's the same thing. Come, go, went, arrive. All of those different things that we can say that mean something different. In Hebrew, it's all the same thing. But in this case, they've added some letters to the word, because it's not just bow or bow. It's hevia. And the whole bow gets lost because the b sound switches to the harder vate or v sound. It's still a bait spelled out, but its sound changes. Meaning doesn't. I should say it does, because by adding the hey to the front of it, it makes it bring instead of just come. All right. I probably spent too much time on that word, huh? Then it says El, so bring it to ha-Kohen. You bring it to the priest, the Kohen. Then it says ve kamatz. And so now we're saying, and it's to squeeze together, to compress, hence to take with the hand. So he's going to take part of that with his hand. And we're going to see that by the words that will follow. Mimana, which is from it. The Kohen is going to take from it. So what I'm trying to tell you is that the amount of the ephah that you're bringing is more than just what can fit in a hand. And this is what's coming up will make us know that. Melo, which is the word for full. He's going to take a handful. Kumzo, which literally means handful or fistful. So he's going to take a fistful from it. It's not going to amount to a fistful. He's just going to take a fistful. And this is et, which points to something. Az karato, as a memorial. It's a reminder of something. It's something that you do for a memory of something. It's like when they make these little memorial parks and stuff when people have died in some tragedy or something. They'll have all those names on it and stuff. That's a memorial. And this that we're doing here is a memorial. Is he ketir. And so he's going to use that flour to make smoke. And it gives a scent. It's to be fragrant. So what they're talking about, even if it doesn't give a scent, which it will, and maybe it's not fragrant though. Maybe your flour stinks. I don't know. I don't think it will. But the point is that it's of the smoke that rises from this. In other words, he's going to throw this on the griddle, if you will, because it's not bars going across. I suppose it's a griddle, right? Griddle's the flat one, right? So anyway, he's going to throw this on that griddle, and this smoke is going to rise up. And it says ha mitzba'ach, so it's the griddle on the altar, the part of the altar where he can do this. Because, well, I don't know, maybe you could throw it in between and it hits the fire and smoke comes up from it. I haven't actually tried it, so I don't know. We should try that and see what happens. This is all, which is on or upon Ishe. So maybe it is that, because that's on the fire. That doesn't literally mean that it has to be literally thrown on the fire. But the fire is, even if it's a griddle, it's heating it up, and you throw it on the griddle, it's still said that you're throwing it on the fire. Let's throw a couple of shrimp on the bobby, you know how they say that. Gonna throw a couple of steaks on the grill or steaks on the fire. Even if it's on the grill, you can still say that you're throwing steaks on the fire. Keep that in mind, because being literal is not the way we go with Hebrew. That's just not the way to do it. And then it says Yahweh. So how would you throw it on the fire of Yahweh, right? Oh man, we can't do anything that the Bible says because we don't have a temple and temple priests who can throw the fire throw it on the fire of Yahweh. Oh, Yahweh, what are we going to do? No, we're not supposed to see it that way. So it's the fire of Yahweh. And then it says chatat. There's your word for sin. That's that. Whatever God told you to do and you didn't, or whatever God said don't do and you did, that's what sin is and what sin is not. And as I've often pointed out, and will point out again today, it doesn't make any difference how offended you are by it. And here's an example. People going around cussing. I find it offensive. But why? Why do I find cussing offensive? Because my parents taught me that it was. If they hadn't taught me that it was offensive, I would not probably be offended by it, right? Because I don't want to watch, I like to watch comedians. I like to laugh. I want to hear funny stuff. But you can't hardly do it anymore because all they want to do is drop F-bombs. What's funny in that? Why can't you be funny without that? There are guys out there that are funny without it. There's a guy, his name's Stein or Stern. It's Stein, isn't it? The blonde-headed guy is so funny.
Gaffigan?
No. This guy's skinny and smaller.
I don't.
He's the Christian. It's either Stern or we don't remember. He's very funny and he doesn't cuss. And then there was this other Texas cowboy guy that didn't cuss. He was very funny. There are people out there that do that. I don't understand why. I just find it very vulgar, I guess is really the word I'm looking for. It's not so much offensive as it is vulgar. And I don't like that. But you know what? No matter how much of that you get, it's not a sin. Cussing is not a sin. You know how I know? Because it's not listed as a sin in God's law. And so no matter how offended I am by it, no matter how disgusting I find it, no matter how, what was that word I used? How vulgar I find it, it's not sin. It is not a sin. You will not have to stand before God and do, 5 Hail Marys because you cussed. It's not a sin. That's a pretty good example, I think. So our translation here is, and bring it to the Cohen. Now we're talking about the flour, if you recall. And the Cohen will take a handful from it, the fine flour, and from that handful he will make a memorial of smoke and make it burn for you on the fire for God, or the fire of God. You could say it either way, for sin. It says his sin, but you'd be the his, for your sin. Wow. And think about that. God is allowing us to bring this sacrifice that's going to take this scale and balance it in the midst of our guilt. That's mercy. If that ain't mercy, I don't know what is. Now, if we go back and I remind you of Leviticus chapter 2, verse 2, there was a note in there from Rashi, because Rashi believed that at the point of taking a handful of flour, that the sacrifice was taken over by the Cohen. Nachmanides felt that the entire procedure was performed by a Cohen, because there was, there's no animal here. And you're handing him, so Rashi's right. Of the word fistful, that's based on the Sifra and on the Babylonian Talmud in specifically Yoma 47a, Rashi, Rashbam, and Haskuni said that it was only the amount that could be held in 3 fingers. Now, what did it just say? A fistful. And now they're going to make it 3 fingers. These guys believe that if there was any part of any of the other ingredients in their hand, it would make the offering invalid. Thus, they needed their forefinger and their thumb to wipe away. Let's see, forefinger and thumb. So they're going to hold it. If you can, I don't know if you can see that, what I'm trying to do. They're saying that you can hold it in your hand like this so that somehow your very long fingers can wipe away whatever shouldn't be there. Oy vey. You can tell these guys never did this, right? You can tell these guys never had a barbecue pit. Anyway. So it would make their offering invalid if they were. Why didn't they just wash their hands? Just saying. So it bothers me when guys do this. The text clearly says it has to be a fistful, and they're like, "Oh no, this is what they did, and this is, I don't know what this was for." Now the Talmud in Menachot 11a says that the whole fist was used. I'd have to agree with that since that's what the Word of God says. The Kyle and Deluge commentary to the Hebrew Bible says the filling of his closed hand. In other words, as much as he could hold with his handful, not merely with 3 fingers, as the Rabbims affirm. So it's like they knew some, like Rashi said, otherwise. I hate those overall statements like that because obviously not all the Rabbim affirmed. Anyway, I think I have enough time to do another one. Let's do 13. Literally it says, and cover upon him, the Cohen, upon sin he, that sin from one from these, and will be forgiven. Oh, I think I might like my favorite word again. To he, and was her, the Cohen, as offering. And I hope that this word for mercy has been boiling up inside of you. It's going to get more and more powerful. All right, let's look at it. Vechiper, that's that covering. I got my chiper on. All right, that's your covering. It covers over. So, and covering alav upon it. HaKohen, the Kohen. This is all again, which is on chatato. That's the sin of his sin. Asher chata, that, again, the word sin, we're hearing sin an awful lot. What's happening here? It's being elevated. We're trying to make it more and more important. We're saying this word a lot. We're saying it over and over and over again because we're trying to get across the point that it's every sin. It's all sin. It's all rebellion of God's law. All of it. All of it. And there's those who say, well, you can't go to heaven if you kill yourself because then you can't ask for forgiveness. Oy vey. Yeshua himself said there was only one thing that could keep you out of heaven. There's one thing that you cannot be forgiven for, that you will not receive mercy for. And what was that? Torah rebellion. The one thing that Christianity has come to the place where they don't believe in anymore. That's a dangerous place to be. And we wonder why all this nonsense is going on in a country that's supposed to be living according to God, supposed to be under that one God. It should explain a lot. Me'echat. This is from one. So he said the sin, and he said sin, sin, sin. Been talking about sin, and now it says from one. One what? Me'ele. From one of these. What are one of these? Well, if we believe that there are 316 laws, like most Jews do, I can tell you there's actually more because the counting was done very poorly. But, garbage in, garbage out. If you want to believe that there are 316 laws, which Maimonides wanted to believe that, why? Because if you add up the letters in God's name, it comes out to 316. So the idea first came along in the 600s. It was mentioned again one time in the 900s that we know of, and didn't really actually exist until Maimonides in the 1200 took the Bible and was determined that he was going to get 316 laws out of it. So he has some laws repeated 2 and 3 times, the very same law, spelled exactly the same way, with the exact same vowel pointing, if you will. In every way, shape, or form, they're identical, but we all have to argue and do that thing. What's it called when you try to harmonize things that are out of whack? Apologist. Apologize. They call it apologetics. We have to come up with these apologetics. Oh no, well, it meant this over there, and it means this over here. No, it's the same one. It's just been repeated, and now they've been recounted. Now, it was a mistake on his part. He did a pretty good job, given that he didn't have a computer. A computer would have caught that, but he didn't have a computer, and so he did it with his own hands. It's not too bad, right? But it's off. And he left a whole bunch of laws out of there. If there's a law about a woman, he just almost didn't touch it. I mean, you can't believe how many of those he just skipped right over like it wasn't a law. So there's a lot more than 360. But let's say we think it's 316. Let's just for grand sake. That's exactly what it is. Okay, then from one of these 316 laws. That's what's being said here. It's from one of these, from any of these things that are given as law, any of these thou shalt or any of these thou shalt nots. Or is it shalt nots? I don't know. Any of these do's or any of these don'ts. From among these that God gave, that's what we're talking about, to be clear. Then it says, ve nislach. I love this word. The to be merciful. Some way, somehow, God's going to show you mercy. He's going to allow you. He's going to allow you in your state of sin to bring his Cohen a sacrifice that will cover you. And once that Cohen makes that sacrifice, he's covered you forever. Why do you think Mashiach is so important in Judaism? Then it says lo, which is to he or to it. It's that sound alike. It sounds like no, but it's not. Vehaita, and was her, to be, to exist. And it will be, and it will come to pass. We can say it either way. La Cohen, to the Cohen, to the priest, or for the priest. It can be either way. La is for or to. T-O or F-O-R. Ka means cha. So it's for the priest. And what is it for the priest? It's the gift. The gift that you're giving here is for the priest. It's not for you. You don't get any of it. Right? It's for him. And interesting enough, the one we're talking about, nobody's eating. So the translation is, and the Cohen will be a covering over him, over his sin that he sinned, from one of these, from any one of these, and he will receive mercy for it, the sin. He'll receive mercy for the sin. And it, the entire sacrifice, will be a gift for the Cohen. Now, Rashi correctly pointed out that the point of the three different offerings, the lamb, the goat, the birds, flour was not the seriousness of the sin, but the economic ability of the sinner. That's mercy on top of mercy on top of mercy. In the depths of our sin and our despair, the Cohen can still make a sacrifice for us. And that Cohen is our covering from then on, forever and ever. There'll never be a time when that sin that we committed is not covered by that Cohen. That should excite one or two of you. I'll go ahead and do this next one to fill in these last 6 minutes, since it's very short. It's literally, it would say, and he spoke, Yahweh, to Moshe, to saying. That's why I went ahead and did it. So what's it? Vayedaber. We've had this a bazillion times already, right? And he spoke. It's to say. It's the idea of putting words in order, of arranging them in a row, arranging them in an order. So this is just not a casual conversation. God thought this through. He was very careful in how he was going to say what he was going to say. And it's God. How do we know? Because it uses his proper name, Yahweh. And this is El, which is to Moshe. So he said it to Moshe. And then it says Lemur. So it's saying, and God spoke to him saying, and then they're going to eventually tell you what he said. So what happens here? There is a switching of the topic, which gives me the ability to tell you something that I finally figured out how to explain today. One of the biggest issues that you have in the translation of biblical text into other languages, especially into English, is that in English we can change subjects like that. And let's call it topic, because every sentence requires a subject. And the subject is you, they, him, it. A ball can be a subject. A house can be a subject. There's got to be something there that is the subject for a sentence to be complete, right? And so if we say that the subject has changed, then we're going to have to use a different word to get this point across. Let's use the word topic. So let's say the topic is idol worship, as in Romans chapter 1. The topic is idol worship. But what happens when an idiom is used? And really, I'm not so sure that this falls under the category of idiom, but I'm going to have to put it that way because in Hebrew, when you say together, what you say is man with man, or man to man, hand in hand, hand to hand. That's together. So hand to hand, together. So when the Bible says, though hand joined in hand, the seed of the righteous shall be saved, is it saying that these guys, even if two guys hold hands and this guy's using his left hand and this guy's using his right hand, and with his right hand he's committing a sin, and with his left hand this guy's committing this? No. Though they commit the sin together, the seed of the righteous will be saved. The unrighteous, not so much, right? Because it's together. So when it says man with man, or man in man, or man with man, they're not saying anything about two men. They're talking about together, a conglomeration, a group. When it says woman to woman, it's doing the same thing. So what happened? We have the subject of idol worship. All of a sudden it says man to man, and we switch topics in this sentence. And we stay on that topic for another sentence. And then suddenly we jump back to the original topic. That doesn't happen in Hebrew. Ever. Ever, ever, ever. Jewish rabbis, Jewish Rabbim Yehudim, they do not do that. They never did that. The Bible doesn't do that. The New Testament doesn't do that. The topic does not change until Yahweh speaks to somebody to say, this is a topic change. This is where it switches the topic. And each sentence will have a subject. So it did not switch from idol worship to gay stuff back to idol worship. It stayed idol worship. The topic never changed. It was always idol worship. Have I left anything out, Donna? So hopefully you can see that it's just like a comma. If I say, when the enemy comes in like a flood, comma, the Lord will lift up a standard against him. That means the enemy's coming in like this flood is just, I'm just being overdone by the enemy. But if we were to move that comma in that single sentence and say, when the enemy comes in, comma, like a flood, the Lord will lift up a standard against him, how different is that? On the one hand, you've got the enemy being overwhelming, and on the other hand, you got God being overwhelming. Which way do you think it's supposed to be? A comma placed in the wrong place changes a sentence. And when you change a topic in a sentence, your translation is wrong. So, no, Romans chapter 1 does not ever talk about gay stuff. It does not ever condemn a gay person. Ever, ever, ever. Being gay is not a sin. How do I know? Because it's not listed in the law as a sin. There is something that gay men are not supposed to do. That is listed. Just one thing. But the rest of it, being gay, no, that's not. No. The topic doesn't change until you have something along the lines of, and the Lord spoke to Paul and said, or and the Lord spoke to Peter, and of course it wouldn't be Paul and Peter, it'd be Shalom and Kepha. But that's beside the point for another day. But hopefully you're getting the idea that these topic changes cause things to go wrong. Oops, I wasn't watching my time there. Trying to do the wrong thing. Commas in the wrong place make the translation wrong. Lots of things make the translation wrong. So let's get the translation right so that people don't have to live in the closet their whole life. And when they come out, they hate the Christians and send our world into chaos. It's why it worries me when people start saying, we need to go back to the way it was. We need to go back to Jesus. Jesus is why we're here. Do you hear me? That's why we're here. Because of bad translation, we have bad doctrine, and the bad doctrine leads to people treating their own children very badly, and then their children start burning down the town. That's not all that's going on, but that's one segment of it. The children get your Supreme Court to ignore the law of the land that they're sworn to uphold and make laws that are supposed to make them happy and obviously do. No, what we gotta go back to is not what was, but what was supposed to be. Let's go back to the Word of God the way it was meant. Not what we turned it into, but what it was supposed to be. That I'll get on board with. Shalom, shalom, y'all.